Raw Law. This is Arkady Frekhtman. I'm a New York City personal injury trial attorney, and I'm back. I was away at TBI Med Legal, which is a conference in California, and it had a lot of the doctors there, neurologists, neuroradiologists, psychologists, and neuropsychologists. And now I got back, and it was a little bit busy the last day or two in the office. And but I wanted to make sure we get in one of the lives. So I'm actually doing this one from my home because I was a little late already. It's 8 p.m. on the East Coast, and I didn't get a chance to do it in the office. So I thought I would go home and do it at home. So yeah. So if anyone has any questions, just feel free to drop the questions in the chat. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll definitely try to do another one probably on Thursday this week where we could get into more of your questions in one of the Raw Law live sessions like we're doing today. And I see SCB is here. He says, thank you for your dedication, Arkady. Oh, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. And Jorge is here. He says, hey, Mr. Arkady, what do you think about the new law in Florida, civil litigation law on case management starting January 1st, 2025? Yeah, well, I'd have to research that. I don't know, what law you're describing, because in Florida, I know Florida has tort reform, and I've done videos on the YouTube channel about the Florida tort reform, which is, basically limiting some damages and new rules and regulations that kind of prevent injury victims from obtaining the maximum amount. But in terms of case management, I don't know what the law is because, I practice in New York, but I could probably research it a bit especially if it's a popular law, and then I can get back to you on that. Yeah. I'm actually starting a trial. I'm doing a traumatic brain injury trial May 19th. It's supposed to go May 19th in the Bronx. And that's why I went to this conference, the TBI conference, because it's all about traumatic brain injuries. And I learned a lot. So I actually have my notes. I ended up using one of these devices called a Kindle Scribe. So you could read books. It's a Kindle, but you could also write on it, and it's all, and then you could export to a PDF. So it's handwritten, but it's all in there. And I also had some other tools that I use that do transcriptions with AI. So anyway, but I have a lot of information. So maybe I'll do some videos about some of the things I learned in the conference. They're really interesting because they were talking about a lot of misconceptions with traumatic brain injury, best ways to litigate. They had a lot of different, it was more like a lecture track. It was 3 days, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But I thought it was a really good conference. I was actually surprised. I thought it was going to be okay, but it was actually very, very good. And I met a lot of other lawyers, including lawyers who are also doctors and who also are specialists in traumatic brain injury. And one of them, for example, offered to review some of my medical records, or even the defense or the IME, the defense medical exam report, which in my case was from a neuropsychologist, and it's really long. It's 150 pages. But the doctor lawyer was I'll be reviewing it, and I could pull it apart and tell you exactly why they're a complete BS, because they know, right? They've been doing this for so many years. So I think that's really helpful. So yeah, so I'm gonna probably email them about that, and I'll do another video where I go over everything that maybe not everything that I learned, but I'm gonna try to organize it into a few different buckets, different categories, because they, like I said, they had videos about traumatic brain injury, but there was a lot about neuropsychology and the testing and obtaining the raw data, because what they do is, the defense doctors, what they do is they give the injury victim the test, right? But they never explain how they administer the test or how they score the test. And there are a lot of things they can do. For example, let's say you get a question wrong. They could prompt you and say, are you sure it's not this? And then you get it right. And then they just score it as though you got it right and you don't have a brain injury. But wait a minute, you got it wrong the first time. That's why you need to have the raw data, right, of the test, how the test is administered. And also when the test is administered, the neuropsychological assessment, there are certain rules, right? But those doctors, the IME doctors, they don't follow the rules. They just do it their own way, right? Because they're being hired by the insurance companies and the defense lawyers. So they're doing it in a way to help the people that hired them, right? Otherwise they won't get paid or they won't get hired on the next one. So it's like a whole, whole thing. It's very interesting, but you could really cross-examine them on that. And you have to get the raw data. That's critical because that has like the way the test is administered, the rules for administration and whether they followed the rules, right? Then you could actually see. Because like in my case, for example, my neuropsychologist, a treating one, and other neuropsychologists from, like NYU, Montefiore, like all these different hospitals, they all say my client does have a brain injury. But the only person that doesn't is this defense neuropsychologist who obviously is a hired gun who, probably didn't follow the protocol. So I've already subpoenaed all the raw data to the courthouse. So now we're going to have some fun. We go to trial. Okay, let me get back to the questions. Here's a question. How much do the IE doctors weigh in a personal injury case when you've been in treatment for 5+ years and they say you're not permanently injured? Skull fractures, post-concussion, and TBI. Yeah, well, I mean, they do weigh in the sense that, you have your doctors, right? Whether your lawyer is going to call experts or your lawyer is going to call treating doctors, right? But basically you have your doctors. The defendants, the people you're suing, you could be suing a truck, right? You could be suing a car, owner of a car. You could be suing a property manager. It's anyone. They don't have doctors, right? And then, of course, the insurance company is the one that's ultimately paying, and the insurance company doesn't have doctors. So the only way they can get a doctor is by sending you to one of their doctors. They call it independent, but it's not. It's their doctor. Their doctor examines you. Usually it's really quick. I mean, in a TBI case, it could be a little longer, like 5-6 hours in a neuropsych assessment. But actually, even that is short because a proper neuropsych assessment should take more than one day, and it should be like 30 hours. But you see what I'm saying? So that's the only way that they can refute or argue against your medical evidence, because that's like their chance. So that's what they do. So, I mean, it is important, but you have to really have a good trial lawyer to explain the difference. Like I have, all these doctors, like in my case, for example, I have like treating doc. One doctor treated her from 2015 to 2023. That's like what, like 8 years. And there's all this evidence. And they have a guy who saw her for like a few hours. And they have differing opinions, So yeah, you just have to like really highlight that. And that way, but yeah, if you have skull fractures and post-concussion syndrome and TBI, that's a really serious case. And then the hanger says, when a case is combined, or when cases are combined, and one policy has $1 million and the other has the minimum, how does that work? So I don't know what you mean by combined. If it's like, for example, you have 2 different cases, or you mean like, for example, 2 different lawsuits, because I'm just not sure what you mean by combined, because like basically the way it could work is if you have 2 different cases, then each one is separate, right? You can combine them somehow, but each one is still separate. You could recover for each one separately. So in the smaller policy, you get the smaller policy. In the million, you get the million. If you're talking about like one accident and there's multiple plaintiffs, and for example, many cars and different people hire different lawyers, and then it just gets consolidated into one case. And then let's say one defendant, let's say, has $1 million, and then another defendant has 25. It just depends on who you prove is at fault, but they're all in the case. It's all in play. So yeah, so I guess either way, you can recover. It's never going to be like lowered or anything like that. It just depends on who's in the case. And then Miguel and Lewis says, hello, Arkady. Last November 6th, they made me my 2nd low back fusion. How long do I have to wait for my last deposition in the Bronx, New York? Right. So yeah, those are like 2 different things, right? So a fusion is an injury, right? Not an injury. It's a procedure. So the procedure is done by a doctor. So you could have that at any time. You could have that before you even file a lawsuit. You could have it after your deposition. The deposition is based on, the scheduling order of the court, as well as how aggressively your lawyer is prosecuting the case. So if you've had your deposition, you said last November, and if you haven't had your deposition yet, you just have to schedule it and hold it. I mean, it shouldn't really take much longer. It could be done it could have been done in December or January. There's no reason to wait. Like, you've already had your fusion, right? If they're waiting for you to have the surgery and you've already had it, there's no reason to wait from November till like, it's almost April, mid-April going into May. I don't know why they're waiting another, what is that, like 7 months? It doesn't make sense. Just hold it. Schedule it and hold it. I don't know. But yeah, better to text me, because there might be other things that I'm missing. It's kind of hard to give you a proper opinion just based on a comment. So text me. It's 347-566-9595. I'm happy to do a private, like, one-on-one consult. I'm going to get back into doing the consult this week. I'm going to start tomorrow and try to catch up by the end of the week. And I apologize to anyone who was waiting on one. I got a lot of texts while I was away, but I didn't have a chance because it's like California. It's like 3 hours earlier, and it was all day, like, lectures. I couldn't miss the conference. So I couldn't really do too many. By the time I got out, it was like 8 p.m. in New York, and I thought that was then I was tired. Okay, let me see. So Miguel, who did his question, Nayslayer says, I think my lawyer has a TBI. No updates 5 months after my ACDF. Oh yeah, that's not good either. If you had an anterior cervical discectomy and fusion, you have a big case. So if you have a big case like that, then your lawyer should be updating you. They should be communicating with you. That's critical. They have to be answering your questions, speaking with you, updating you, and there's really no excuse for that. And also, just text me, 347-566-9595. Let me drop it in the chat. And then you can just text me, and I'm happy. Just when you text me, just tell me briefly. Like, I always put it, I think now it automatically will text you back, like an automated system, and it'll tell you, hey, just give me your name, the brief facts. And when I say brief, just like 1 or 2 sentences. The injury is also very brief, and just your city. And really, that's about it. If you could put the date of incident, and maybe your question, or just one sentence, just really quick. Like, the whole thing could be really quick, because some people, like, they don't text at all. They just call me, but I can't always pick up because I could be in court or doing something, right? So I can't always call them back. And then other people just send me these long texts. Like, I can't, read, like, what is it, Moby Dick or whatever, some long book, like hundreds of pages. So yeah, the best thing to do is just give me that information, because if I have that information, then at the consult we could speak, and then we can get into the details. Okay, let me keep going. Lasana says, hey, quick question. If you didn't get to settle after sending a demand letter pre-lawsuit, what's the chance of the insurance company being fair in after filing the lawsuit and send a demand letter after suit? Well, yeah, but I mean, if you didn't get to settle pre-lawsuit, then definitely file the lawsuit. But I don't know if they're going to be fair, like, immediately after you file the lawsuit. Probably you're going to have to do something, right? Like, show them, have depositions, ask them for discovery, kind of like punch them a little bit, like, basically it's like a boxing match, right? And basically before the match started, they said, we're not going to settle with you. We think we could beat you. So now that the match started, you got to, like, throw a few punches, punch them in the face, punch them in the body. Then they're going to, like, be like, oh, wow, these guys are real. And then they're going to settle, right? Otherwise, if the lawyer is not punching, if the lawyer just files a lawsuit and then calls them up again, can you please give me money now? It's like, they're going to be like, well, this guy's a joke, right? And plus, I don't know who the lawyer is. You have to look at the history. If they have a lot of trials and they've won, like, millions and millions of dollars before, then they could be scared and say, oh, this guy has a good track record, or this lady has a good track record, we have to pay. But if it's one of these lawyers that's just on a billboard and never goes to court, they're going to say, well, these guys don't go to court anyway. They're just bluffing. What are the chances? Like, in the last 10 years, they've never gone to court. What are the chances this is the first time? And even if they do go to court, they don't know what they're doing, right? Because they haven't been in court for the last 20 years. So you see what I'm saying? So it all depends on those things. And I could do that for you. I could do the research. If you text me, I could look up the lawyer and privately, confidentially send you the verdict searches, the Westlaws, Lexis, of their past settlements and their past verdicts. So you can see for yourself, hey, what kind of lawyer is handling this. So a lot of it depends on the lawyer. But I mean, you're going to have to probably, to be honest with you, you're going to have to wait a little bit. Like, you're going to have to, at least have the lawyer request discovery, right? Have the lawyer respond to the defendant's discovery. Have the lawyer, have them take your deposition. You take the deposition of the defendant and score some points, like show that they're, were negligent, that they're at fault, And then also I like to do depositions of corporate representatives, because those representatives, they don't speak for their individual capacity. They don't say, I'm Joe Blow, I think X. Nobody cares what Joe Blow thinks, but they speak for the company. So if you're suing, let's say like Walmart, right? Or you're suing any kind of company, any kind of organization. Now this person is speaking on behalf of the organization, and you say, well, what is the official safety policy of Walmart or Amazon or whoever you're suing, right? And then you get that person to speak, and then you can use that. Then it's like gold. And then and there's a lot of other things you could do. It's known as 30b-6 under the federal law, and every state has it as well in state law. So that's very powerful. So see that you do things like that, then you're gonna like get a bigger settlement. And all these things. What I also do is I send my clients to like the best doctors, right? So then the medicals are strong. Then if they don't want to, like I have a case now, they don't want to settle. They're lowballing me. So guess what? And it's already like, he's already had depositions. He's already been to a lot of doctors. He has a lot of injuries. He has TBI. He has, surgeries like a laminectomy to his lower back. So next step I'm going to do, I'm going to send him to like back to his doctor. The doctor is going to talk about future medical expenses. And he's a young guy. He's like in his 30s. So future medical expenses are probably going to be like $2 million, right? So I'm going to get that report. I'm going to serve it on the insurance company. Now I have $2 million in future medical expenses, plus the pain and suffering for the past, plus the pain and suffering for the future, plus the loss of enjoyment of life. Then I do the human story, right? Get his photographs, community witnesses, before and after witnesses from his life. Better not to get like relatives, but rather like coworkers, friends, neighbors, independent people. So it becomes a real powerful story. So it's a lot better. So that's that's usually the best thing. And let me see. So we did that one. That's a good question, actually. The Hanger asks, in regard to my last question, it was 2 separate accidents back to back, different injuries. Oh, I see. So 2 separate accidents. Yeah, so you could recover for each accident. The fact that they consolidate them into one case doesn't, prevent you from, recovering for each one separately. Yeah, so you could definitely recover for each separately. And then A24 says, I was involved in a car accident from behind. I treated for 1 year until now, still in pain. And after 1, I have the deposition. What is the question going to be about? We finished discovery and the mediation is in 2 months. So you were involved in a car accident. You got hit from behind. You treated for a year and you still have pain. So I'd have to know what your injuries are, and you said you had a deposition, or you have one coming up. The questions in the deposition are basically just how the accident happened, what happened, and also what your injuries are. How has it affected your life? Things like that. So it's pretty straightforward. I did a video. It's called Super Depositions. If you search on my channel, it's like a 40-minute video, and it actually goes through all the questions, and it actually even gives you some tips on how to best answer them. So take a look at that video, Super Depositions. But yeah, it's basically just questions and answers about your injuries and the liability or what happened. Okay, and then SCB says, was there anything about dysautonomia? No, I don't think so. It doesn't ring a bell, but I could, of course, do some research and do a video about that if you're interested. Just text me about it too, so I don't forget. 347, or I'll write it down. Let me take a note so I don't forget. Dysautonomia. I'm not familiar with that, but I could research that and maybe do a video about that. Dysautonomia. Let me see. Okay. Let's see. Let's go to the next question. Oh, 824 says, not my fault. Okay, that makes sense. That was the car accident from behind, right? And then George Welcome says, is it common for an insurance company who's providing no-fault benefits to an insured to send them to an IME 3 months after the crash and then say that the insured is fine and no longer needs PT? Yeah, that happens in like every case, pretty much every case, right? Because if you're the, if you're the insured, right? So you're getting no fault. No faults are first party, meaning like, of course, the person in the car, right? So if you're like, say, driving a car and the insurance company is Geico and you get hit in the rear, Geico is going to pay for all your medical care up to $50,000, but they're not going to pay for the rest of your life, right? What if you get into a car accident, you're 20 years old? They're not going to pay until you're 80, right? They're just going to pay until their doctor says you don't need any more treatment, which is usually about 3 to 4 months. Then after 3 months of PT, they're going to send you to their IME. It's a no-fault IME. The no-fault IME guy is going to say, you're all better, you don't need any more treatment. They're going to cut you off. And then you have to just use your health insurance or lien or some other method of payment, But that's basically how every case works. So yeah, that's very common. And then Jose says, my ceiling collapsed and I got a lumbar fusion. I just filed a lawsuit now. My landlord is trying to evict me in retaliation. When I win in housing court, will this help my lawsuit? No, it doesn't really matter. Although, I mean, if he's trying to evict you in retaliation, you could probably try to bring that up as part of, somehow. I'm not sure how you would get that in, but you could try to sneak that in somehow if the case goes to trial on the personal injury. But winning in housing court it doesn't really matter, right? Because that's housing court. That's about like whether you're allowed to live there, whether they're keeping the place in proper repairs, whether or not they can evict you, or it's a holdover, all those things. But, and if you don't pay rent, they can make you pay rent. These kind of things are housing court. That doesn't matter. You're suing in Supreme Court or in civil court for money damages, right? That's a civil lawsuit, civil justice. That's completely different. So I would just focus on the civil case. And but if you have a lumbar fusion with a ceiling collapse, that's a good case. I just settled a case like that for, I think, close to $3 million. So those could be really good cases. And then Mary says, if there is an 11 million policy and I had a plate and screw in my neck due to a neck fusion plus a tear on each knee, what do you think I will get? Well, I mean, I have to know where you are, right? Like what happened. But the fact that there's a large policy definitely, bodes well for you because you have the ability to get much more, right? And if you had a plate in your neck, that means it's a serious fusion. So, I mean, I settled a fusion case recently for 3.5 million. I mean, people settle them for all different numbers, anywhere from 2 to 3 million, 1 million, all the way up to sometimes if it's real serious, it could even be like 5 million, 10 million or more. So it just depends on the location of the venue, right? How it's prepared, who's handling it. There's a lot of different factors. So we'd have to look into it. And then Gatry says, hi, Mr. Arkady, I really need to talk to you. Okay, sure. Just text me. I'm happy to chat. And then David says, do you have any colleagues in California? Yeah, of course. I know a lot of the top lawyers in California. I just actually met with some of them this past, from Thursday to Sunday. I just was meeting with some of them. Absolutely. Some of the best. I mean, one of them was just getting like tremendous verdicts. He got a verdict of, I think, 21 million, which actually was increased to 34 million with interest. That was the first case. Then he did a second case. He got 50 million. Then he got a third case and he got 48 million. 3 trials in a row. He's really good. I met with him. He was actually speaking there with a neurologist. They're writing a book together on brain injury. So he was speaking with the neurologist and I was chatting with him after the talk. And then I know a lot of other lawyers in California too. And it depends on the type of case, right? Because it depends on first, where in California, because it's a big state. And also more importantly, like what type of case, because some lawyers in California are going to be like specialists in a certain area. Like one lawyer, he's a lawyer and a doctor. He's good with med mal, right? Medical malpractice. But another lawyer might be good for like trucking. So it depends on the type of case you have. But yeah, just text me. It's better to text. I'm happy to help you with that. And then Amy says, thank you, Mr. Frekhtman, for all your info. I recently just transitioned from litigation paralegal to trial paralegal within my firm, and your videos have helped me tremendously. Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, that's great that it's helping people like paralegals and other people that are in the legal industry. Yeah, I had like a young attorney also reach out to me, and I was doing some Zoom calls and speaking to the attorney, and we're going to maybe work together on some cases. So I'm happy to do that also if someone's in a law firm, right, or a young attorney or in law school. I'm happy to help with that as well. I really think it's important to give back and to share knowledge as much as possible. So, oh, and David says, do you practice in California? I don't personally, although I could co-counsel with. So, for example, if I was to, refer the case to a local attorney in California, I could then co-counsel with them, and then you can apply for like pro hac vice admission from a different state, and then if the case were to go to trial, you could do it together. So that's possible. Okay, and then Casey says, I've been getting injections for a year. I'm ready to settle. Yeah, depending on the type of injection. Some injections, you don't want to just keep getting injection after injection. Like, for example, if it's epidural steroid injections, I don't really recommend. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but from what I've seen just with my patients over the last 20 plus years, I don't recommend just continuing to get epidurals. You might try one epidural, two epidurals, and if it's not helping, then switch to a different procedure under pain management, such as an ablation or a percutaneous discectomy, and that'll also increase the value of your case and make it settle quicker, right? Like, for example, you can get 10 epidurals, but the case will still be like a $50,000 case, or you could get one epidural and then one perk, and then it'll be like a $300,000 case, right? So it doesn't make sense. But yeah, I would speak to your doctor about that. And then Bert says they are asking to do another deposition. Is that normal? I mean, sometimes depending on why they're asking for it, and basically they usually ask for a second deposition if you have a new injury that they didn't talk about in the first deposition. But that's usually the main reason. And then the machine says, what is the best excuse or reason to remove a trial off the calendar? I'm not sure if I'm still going through pain management and possible lower back surgery, but my lawyer is not answering me. I mean, you could remove it off the trial calendar for any reason. Like, for example, if you're going to have surgery, that's a good reason. You say, well, I'm going to have surgery, so I'm not ready to go to trial. So take it off the calendar. Let me have my surgery. Then they put it back in the same place it was. But you could just do that by stipulation. There's no one's going to stop you. I mean, the lawyer should do that, but you should just call them and have them do that. And then Shell says, what about medical malpractice? And I'm not sure what the question is. What about medical malpractice? Was there a first question from Shell? Medical malpractice? Yeah, we handle that as well. I mean, I try to only take those if it's really serious and life-changing, because those could get really expensive, because first you have to review the case with a doctor, right? And the expert could charge $10,000, $20,000 just for the review. Then if you go to trial, and they usually do go to trial because the doctors don't agree to settle unless it's like egregious, clear malpractice. And the reason is because if they agree to settle, their premiums are going to go up on their insurance. And then they have it's almost like a database that you've been, kind of like convicted of malpractice. They don't want that. So they fight the cases. So most of the cases go to trial. So you really need a good case. It has to be real serious. Otherwise, I know people sometimes want to sue for like every little thing, like, oh, the doctor looked at me funny or whatever, but you can't really do that. Though those cases they take a long time, and you need an investment of like maybe 50 to 100K minimum to even do a med mal case. So they have to be really serious, life-changing injuries. And then Nayslayer says, should your lawyer show the settlement opportunity to the client for approval before sending it, or is it not necessary? Yeah, I mean, sure, if the client wants to see it, they should probably show it. I don't see why not. I mean, ultimately, it's the client's case. So yeah, I mean, they shouldn't really be hiding anything from the client. And then Lion says, hope all is well. My fusion never took. I have a new orthopedic surgeon from Lenox Hill. He has to redo everything plus the one below. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. That can make the case much, much bigger, though. I mean, you don't want that because it's such a painful and serious injury, but it definitely makes the case way, way bigger. So if you need a consult, just text me. I'm happy to chat about that and give you some advice. The 347-566-9595. And then Mary says, Bronx slip and fall, one wet fall in my building. No sign in the building of it being wet. Yeah, that's a good case, because if you have a slip and fall and it's wet, then they have to have, a sign, or, I don't know how it was wet, if people were tracking in the water because it was a rainy day. Sometimes the ceiling is leaking. Sometimes, super is mopping and he leaves the puddle, he doesn't clean up. There's a lot of different, but those are good cases. I do a lot of that. That's like a lot of my practice is premises liability. I do a lot of those. Okay, and then Cash Scratch says, what can I do if my attorney dies or is so incapacitated that they can't finish my case? Yeah, so I mean, in that case, you obviously have to get a new attorney, right? If they're either passed away or unable to handle the case, you just have to hire a new attorney. And then Jose says, Are ceiling collapses that require a lumbar fusion a good case in Fairfield County, Connecticut? Yeah, I think so. Actually, I just met with a lawyer yesterday from Connecticut, and they're actually like an amazing lawyer. Actually, this lawyer, yeah, he has two offices, right? He has a main office in Nevada, in Las Vegas, and that's his main office. But he opened up a branch with his partner, the same partner that he has in Nevada, plus a third partner. And the third partner is admitted in Connecticut. And actually, the lawyer who's admitted in Connecticut is the lawyer who got that $100 million verdict in Connecticut. I don't know if you heard about that. Did I do a video about that case? But anyway, there was a $100 million verdict in Connecticut a few years ago. And this is the lawyer that got it. So now they're all together. And I actually met with them on Monday. They came over to my office and we chatted because they were in town. They have a New York partner. They have a Connecticut partner. So yeah, I mean, if you needed a lawyer for that, just text me. I can maybe get you a consult with those guys. And so the lawyer, the main lawyer, he just got a verdict. It was an insurance case out of Colorado. It was also on the Courtroom View Network. He just got a verdict of like $145 million. It was an interesting case. It was like a first party type benefit. It was a workers' comp, right? But the workers' comp insurance carrier decided not to allow the injured patient to have a certain procedure. And so because he didn't have the procedure, it was like bad faith workers' comp insurance. And he had a much, much, much worse recovery. And so they sued for bad faith and they ended up getting, there's only like, I think 2 states in the entire nation where you could do that, but Colorado was one and they ended up winning like $145 million. So I haven't seen the trial, but I know it's available. It was recorded on CBN. So I'm going to watch some of it. I just need to find time for all these things, but it's so many things going on now. So I want to watch some of that trial, maybe do a few videos about that case. But yeah, but Connecticut is like, yeah, that's definitely. And then David says, Bay Area for T-bone accident, not at fault. I texted you. Okay, let's try to chat tomorrow or Thursday, Friday. I'm around as well. Yeah, I'll get back to you. I'm sorry. I'm going to go through all my texts and maybe write it all down. And because I got a few, I got like maybe 20 or 30. So I got to get back to everybody. And then TOT says, are hand fractures from a car accident worth hiring a personal injury attorney? Oh, yeah, of course, if you have a fracture. I mean, the only time it's not worth hiring a personal injury attorney is if you got into a little fender bender, right? And you're not even sure if you're hurt. You don't even want to get treatment. Then I would say don't hire a lawyer. Maybe you get on the phone. And if you're sure you're not even going to get, like, you're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to do chiropractic. You're not going to go to the hospital. You're not going to do anything. Maybe get on the phone and, you know, if you have a little, like, I don't know, like a boo-boo and it's going to go away. Okay, have them send you a check for like $1,000 and just forget about it. But if you have a fracture, of course, because they're never going to pay you for the fracture. I mean, they will pay you something if you try to do it on your own, but they'll try to lowball you and pay you like $5K or less. Whereas with a lawyer, a hand fracture could be $50K or more, right? Depending on the policy, depending on the lawyer. So that's like 100%. That's like a no-brainer. You know, you don't want to take $5,000 when you can take $50,000. If you have to pay a third, but you're going to get like 35 in your pocket, as opposed to getting like, you know, 5 or less than 5. They might even not give you 5. Who knows what? I don't know what they're doing with people directly, but they're not fair. And then Mary says, well, I am the same person who had the plate and screw on my neck with the tear on both knees. Okay, yeah. No, I mean, that's serious. If you have a plate and screw on your neck, just text me. I'm happy to chat with you on the text. And oh, I see, right, the plate and screw, and there's a slip and fall in the Bronx. Oh yeah, well, in the Bronx, yeah, my case is in the Bronx too. My case is actually also a slip and fall. It's a little different. It was like a pipe, like one of those elbow pipes, and it was leaking, and it caused a sudden, like, really heavy plumbing leak. But it was inside the apartment, but they were trying to fix it from like July, then in August, then in September. Then finally, it was almost like laughable. I just found out, like, you know, it's almost laughable because finally, when the guy finally tried to fix it, you know how the pipes obviously have to connect, and the guy just like tries to connect them, but they were like the wrong size. One was like a little smaller, one was like a little bigger, so he could never really connect the pipes. So he's just like, okay, well, I did my best, and he leaves, right? So then of course they're going to leak because they're not connected, the vertical pipe with the elbow. So, you know, so anyway, so she had a massive brain injury from the fall. But yeah, I'm happy to chat about your case. Just text me. It's 347-566-9595. I could help you or just give you whatever you need. You know, I could give you some advice. And I could review if you have an attorney, I could review your attorney for you and send you confidentially their verdicts, their settlements, or just answer your questions. I'm happy to help. But that's a good case. Yeah, if you have a slip and fall and they didn't have wet floor signs. I want to know like where the water, you know, emanated from. Like what's the source of the water? That's always a good question. But then you have these massive injuries with a plate and screws in the neck and a tear on the knees. So that could be a big case. Okay, and then One Love says neck fusion, shoulder surgery, and back surgery. I have a deposition for Friday. Do they offer a settlement amount at the deposition, or how long does the case to go to trial? It's an elevator accident at work, on the job. The job terminated me. How long does a case like this to get to trial or settle? Okay, so if you have a neck fusion, shoulder surgery, and back surgery, so you're saying you have a back surgery like a laminectomy plus a neck fusion surgery plus a shoulder, so you have 3 surgeries, and you have a deposition scheduled for Friday. Now, they usually don't offer you money at the deposition, but they're going to ask you a lot of questions. So the lawyer should be preparing you. If you have a case like this is like a $5 million case, you know, he should be preparing you 4 or 5 times before the deposition. If they're not doing that, that's a big red flag. Elevator accident at work, and if the job terminated you, you could still sue, well, whoever was at fault, right? The elevator company or the building, whoever, you know, the third parties. That's a good case. I don't see any issues with the case. I mean, how long it's going to take, I don't know, right? Because depends how they're preparing it, what they're doing, but they still have to take depositions of the defendants. And then you have to put it on the trial calendar. Usually the big money is paid as you get closer to the actual trial, although you could settle it once you're on the trial calendar, once discovery is finished. But you have to do all those things. You have to request documents, right? You have to depose proper witnesses. You have to do corporate representatives, like I was just talking about earlier in this video. So I don't know like what's done and what's not done. But usually if your deposition hasn't even gone, then nothing else has been done because your deposition is the first step. So it's probably going to be a few years. But there are ways to like speed it up. Like, for example, the settlement opportunity letters. If you send them a letter and you say, hey, pay me like, you know, whatever, like $3 million, you have 30 days. If you don't, that's fine. But once we go to trial, it's going to be 7, and you show them why, right? You get all the experts, safety, elevator experts, whatever you need, the fusion doctor, you show them all the evidence. That's a good way to push the buttons to get them to settle early. So I've been doing that, and I've been having success. But, you know, I think a case like that, that's a big case. So you want to prepare it properly. Okay, and then TOT says, thank you, or you're very welcome. And Sarah says, does a property general liability trump over weather storm laws? Would there ever be a scenario where it would be, say there was an improper lighting on a property and there was ice? So you mean like general liability law is more important than the storm in progress doctrine or the weather? I mean, they don't really compare laws like that. There's no such thing. What they really do is they look at the facts of what happened. So for example, if you fell on ice, but there was a storm in progress, you know, that could be an issue because under the storm in progress doctrine, you can't sue. So it just depends. You'd have to look at the details. But on the other hand, if there wasn't a storm in progress and there was ice and they didn't have an opportunity to clean the ice, well, then they could be at fault. You know what I'm saying? Or if they didn't have lighting, well, obviously you're supposed to have lighting, you know, at night. You can't see the ice because there's no lighting, so you sue them for the lighting. I mean, the only real time that it's difficult is if the storm is actually going on, because the theory is that you don't have to clean because the storm is in progress, right? So like, for example, I clean the snow, but then more snow is falling, so what's the point? But if it's not, you know, if you were saying you fell because of the lighting, well, that's a different issue, right? Because if they had lighting, even if the storm was in progress, so you would see it, maybe you wouldn't walk there. But if there's no lighting, you know, I don't know, it gets complicated, but basically I'd have to know the facts and then I could give you better advice. And then Hope says, so the city is trying to get out of the case and only blame the maintenance company, airport, slip and fall. Have you heard of this? Does that usually play out in favor of the city? Going on 5 years so far, 1 to 3 defendants, laminectomy, injections, RFTCs, knee injections in Los Angeles. And thank you for all your insight. Carpet was not secured down and uplifted in the jet bridge. So the city's trying to get out of the case and blame the maintenance company and the airport. I mean, yeah, that does usually happen. I mean, everybody wants to either blame the plaintiff, right? or blame somebody else, because nobody wants to, take accountability or responsibility, because if you take that, then it means you have to pay. So basically that's a standard legal trick, right? Don't take any responsibility, don't take any accountability. Whether or not who's at fault, you'd have to have your attorney explain that to you, what their theory of the case is. I guess if it's a city airport, the city could be liable, but you also have whoever is responsible for the day-to-day management of the airport. It might be a private company that maintains it, that keeps it in good repair, that inspects it, right? Things like that. So you might have liability on both, and the jury could give a percentage. They could say the city is 50% and the maintenance company is like 50%, for example. It could be any percentage, right? So that really is hard to say. That could be that's very factual. But yeah, I think that's pretty common that they do try to, get out of the case and blame someone else. Okay, I have to run a little early because it's already late here. It's almost 9 o'clock. But let's do another one this week. I'll try to do one on Thursday for sure. And I'm going to call everybody back and make appointments with people that I haven't spoken with. And yeah, so just text me. It's 347. I'll put it in the chat again, 347-566. Yeah, and I'm happy to chat. We could schedule a call. What I might do also in the future is I might make one of those calendar links, like Calendly, I think it's called, and then I'll just put the available times, and then you could already, when you text me, you can get the link, and then you could just pick a time, like for example, Wednesday at like 3:30 p.m. or whatever, and that way you already have an appointment, right? So it's a little easier than me texting back and forth, like when is a good time for you? What is it, So I'm going to try to set that up by next week as well. Okay, everyone, please like and subscribe to our channel. We are here for you. Our goal is helping serious injury victims and families. All the best, and I'll talk to you very soon. Have a great night. Bye-bye.